Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections, along with a daily mains answer writing program. In the analysis part, we'll first have a comprehensive discussion with respect to the disruptions being witnessed in the current world order, the challenges being confronted by India, and the way forward. Then, in the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the importance of Silica initiative for India, the associated challenges, and the way forward. Then, in the simplified section, we'll have a look at 5 different articles from a special perspective of UPSC Prelims 2026, along with the value addition. So, stay tuned. Coming to the very first topic of today's discussion, this is with respect to the world order in 2026, power, politics, and India. The politics among nations, more commonly referred to as geopolitics, is based upon the capacity of states and the relative power exercised by different states. By states, I mean to say different countries. Now, see, here we come to a new concept known as the world order. Now, you would ask, what is world order? The power and authority exercised by different countries, institutions, and organizations at a particular moment of time. That defines the world order. Now, since power and authority, which is exercised by different countries or institutions, it is a dynamic concept, the world order itself becomes a dynamic concept. Now, what about the present times? If you talk about the present world order, it is fragmented in nature. Why? Primarily because of the great power politics. What do you mean by great power politics? The steps or the actions which are taken by the great powers, those powers or those countries which are relatively more powerful than the other countries around the world, that is leading to disruptions in almost every domain. Be it US, be it China, be it Russia, that is creating a kind of shock waves in the global world order. And this is affecting those countries the most which have less of resources, which do not have that much amount of strategic resources as compared to these great powers. We have a very brilliant piece which has been featured in the Hindu, written by the former National Security Advisor M.K. Narayanan, who basically talks about that what is this present world order and how different countries are creating disruptions, primarily the US. He also talks about the stance of China. He also talks about the steps which are being taken by Russia to basically protect itself. He then also looks at the South Asian framework. He also gives importance to the European part. So what we'll be doing today is we'll be analyzing the current world order and we'll be taking a regional view. We'll be talking about all these participants. And then we'll also talk about that what are the challenges which are associated with respect to India. What are the challenges which are being confronted by India? And what should be the way forward for India in these critical times? Believe me, it's going to be a very comprehensive discussion and a very important, so that you understand the nitty-gritties of the geopolitics, so that you understand what is really going around as of now, right? So he says it's a mixed bag as far as the global outlook for 2026 is concerned. Now, this is a very important part of GS2 international relations. As I told you, what is the world order? Because this is very important to understand. World order means that we have different powers and authorities. The different powers and authorities which are exercised by different countries, organizations, institutions around the world at a particular moment of time. That defines the world order. There were times when UK was the dominant power. Before that, the Dutch was the dominant power. Then post Second World War, what we saw, the emergence of a bipolar world order, where we had USA, the democratic forces on one hand, and then we had the socialist forces spearheaded by the erstwhile USSR, right? And then in 1991, what we saw was the disintegration of this bipolar world order, and therefore what emerged was a unipolar world order till 2001. Once we witnessed the collapse of World Trade Center. Since then, what we are witnessing is a multipolar world order. Why multipolar? Because we have a lot of other countries, including China, including India, Brazil, Germany, which are emerging powers. And these emerging powers, they make the whole system as that of multipolar. I hope it is clear. Now, Once we talk about the decline of rules-based international order. तो भाई rules-based international order है क्या? When did it come into being? Post Second World War, we had a framework of liberal institutionalism, where different countries came together and said that we will form certain liberal institutions in the form of United Nations, or we had the Bretton Woods institutions in the form of the IMF, the World Bank. The very philosophy was to make sure that things are run on the basis of rules and regulations, defined rules and regulations, so as to make sure that there is multilateralism, right? And the sovereignty of different countries is respected. That was the very basis post Second World War. But what we are witnessing right now, by 2026, this order is being tested by the great power assertiveness. As I told you in the beginning, that once we're talking about the great power, we're not just referring to US, we're also referring to the powers like Russia, China, right? So what we are witnessing is most of these countries, they're now basically running the system on the basis of their own geopolitical selfish interest. And that is compromising the peace and stability around the world, right? So what are the features? What are the features of the present world order, if someone asks you? So we can say that we have unilateral, coercive actions which are being taken by the states. For example, the US, imposition of sanctions, right? Then what we can say is the exercise of powers by different countries around the world without taking into consideration the important bodies like the United Nations, right? Next, what we have seen is that there has been a direct infringement of sovereignty. Take the case of Venezuela, where a sitting president has been abducted, including his wife. So this is a direct infringement of sovereignty. And all these things point towards the instability in the current world order, right? The fragmented nature. Now this reflects the realist geopolitics, where the selfish geopolitical interests of different countries are at the center stage, and they are not giving due importance. They're not giving due importance to that of the rules-based international order. They're not giving importance to what should be done or what rules have to be followed with respect to the different international agreements and treaties, right? They are taking the unilateral actions. Now, once we talk about whether it's just restricted to the US, the answer is no, right? Whenever we will see this, we'll think that US is coming up with its own, and we'll discuss the Monroe Doctrine, which is a resurgence of Monroe Doctrine. But is it just the US which is doing that? The answer is no. Because we have countries like China. Is China exercising any form of doctrine? Yes, the answer is yes. And it is exercising a doctrine in the form of the core interest doctrine, where it has made very clear that when it comes to Taiwan, when it comes to Xinjiang, when it comes to Tibet, it would not tolerate any kind of interferences, right? Or let's talk about Russia. Russia is having its own near abroad doctrine, where it has maintained a very clear stance that with respect to those countries which are bordering Russia, it would not want any kind of interference as far as the NATO is concerned. And that is the prime reason we are witnessing the Ukrainian crisis. I hope it is clear. Now, let's talk about the doctrinal resurgence. What we talk about is the Monroe Doctrine. See, we had a historical doctrine where in 1823, we had the former president of the US, James Monroe, who came up with this Monroe Doctrine. The very objective was to make sure that in the Western Hemisphere, US commands the overall authority. That was the very objective. And it had certain key principles. What were the key principles? The very first was non-colonization. Means what? It was made clear to the European powers that now the Americas, North America and South America, it is not open for colonization by any of the European power from now. It was very clearly said to them. The second was the separate spheres of influence, or the separate spheres, you can say that. What the Monroe Doctrine said, that US and European powers have different political systems and they should remain different, right? The third was with respect to non-interference. it was made clear that America would not intervene or interfere in the European affairs, and European powers have to make sure that they don't interfere in the American affairs, in the Americas, including North Americas and South Americas. So this was basically a policy where it was clearly said that no one should intervene in this particular sphere, the Western Hemisphere. Now, President Trump has come up with a renewed and a more aggressive version, what people are calling as Dondo Doctrine. And this has two aspects. The very first aspect is President Trump has made this clear that in the Western Hemisphere, there would be a complete dominance of the US. We will have a complete dominance in the Western Hemisphere as far as the security of the Americas is concerned, right? The second aspect, he has very clearly told, especially through the National Security Strategy, which was released in November 2025, that the non-Western powers, including Russia and China, they would not be allowed to create a strategic foothold in the Western Hemisphere, in the Latin American countries specifically. So this has been very clearly enunciated, marked in the National Security Strategy. And this is, again I'm saying, it's a more aggressive version of that of the Monroe Doctrine. I hope it is clear. Now, the National Security Strategy definitely talks about this, and it also talks about the other provisions, and it primarily at the very center places the US interests. It says that now US should focus upon making itself more powerful, the very objective on the basis of which President Trump won the election, make America great again, where he has put at the center the American interest. And that is the reason what we are witnessing now is an inward looking posture with respect to the US. Because US, during the years of 2000 and 2011 till 2011, it had a very broad approach where it focused upon the Middle East, Afghanistan, Indo-Pacific, and all these areas. Now it is saying that we will have an important role in the global affairs, no doubt about that, but we will be focusing more upon our internal recalibration so that we again come as the most dominant power in the world, right? Now, what the article talks about, and I'll be also adding many of the points from my side as well. When we talk about Europe is now being criticized for losing its strategic autonomy. Why do you think so? What people are saying is that Europe has lost its strategic autonomy, its decision-making power. It is in a way completely dependent upon the US. Let's talk about the very first part of the excessive dependence on the US. Once we talk about the security aspect, which was clearly manifested, especially post the Russia-Ukrainian conflict, what we see is that the whole security construct of the Europe, it is based upon NATO, right? And US as a country is supplying more than 70% of the defense budget with respect to NATO. So you have NATO, which is primarily responsible in the European construct, and you have US, which is giving more than 70% of its budget. So we have very less contribution by different countries, and that is what President Trump has been saying, to increase the budget relative to the GDP of different countries, right? Next is with respect to the economic and energy vulnerabilities. Before this particular conflict, the Russia-Ukrainian conflict, more than 40% of the Europe's energy needs were sourced from Russia, right? After the war began, we had a lot of sanctions which were imposed primarily by Russia and agreed to by the Europe, and that is also one of the aspects of which is hampering the strategic autonomy of Europe. Because whatever US has said with respect to what we should do with Russia, Europe has agreed to that. And there were sanctions which were imposed, and Europe had to stop its energy supplies. And therefore, it had to buy energy supplies from various portions around the world, including the US. So the amount of LNG exports from the US to the Europe has increased. They're more than doubled. Similarly, we have the Middle East, and that is how you'll have to understand that how war benefits different countries. We have always said that US as a country, it exploits war to the maximum possible extent, and that too in a very economic sense. It is trying to make the best of the profits out of the war, right? Then we have the economic aspect. Why? Because since the prices of the energy rose after the war, many of the companies, many of the manufacturing industries in Europe, they basically shifted to the US. Why? Because President Trump, through various acts and policies, he has been providing a lot of subsidies for the domestic manufacturing in the US. So this is in a way is boosting the overall production in the US itself, and this is diminishing the production in the Europe. I hope it is clear. Then we have the industrial decline, the same thing, because most of the industries either they have shifted to the US or they have shifted their production bases to China or some of the Southeast Asian countries. And the overall purchasing capacity in the Europe is also reducing because people don't have enough to buy. The overall salaries or the overall capacity which they have, it is reducing. Then we have technological dependence. How come technological dependence? Whatever research we are witnessing with respect to artificial intelligence or machine learning or cloud computing, I'm not saying Europe is not doing that, but it is primarily in the emerging technologies, it is primarily in the US. And European countries, in one way or the other, they are relying on the US technologies or the technologies which are basically being manufactured in Japan or South Korea. So technologically also, they're not that advanced as compared to the US. So in one way or the other, they are in complete dependence mode with respect to the US. And you must have observed, once this Greenland controversy started, many of the European countries said that we will come out of NATO if US does any kind of this particular thing, if it tries to annex the Greenland. So why? Because they even are now realizing that in one way or the other, they are being guided by the US foreign policy, right? Next part is West Asia. What we are witnessing in West Asia. We already saw what happened after the Hamas attack of October 2023. Israel started and it carried out atrocities in Gaza, right? So as of now, there has been a peace plan which was also proposed by President Trump, right? But again, it has been violated. There have been ceasefires and not. But again, there is a temporary calm which we can acknowledge. But there is deep instability with respect to the Israel-Palestine conflict because a lot of the civilians, including the women and children, have been killed, especially in Gaza. And this has led to humanitarian crisis. People don't even have enough to eat. So this is a humanitarian crisis. Next, let's talk about Iran. Again, this is becoming a geopolitical flashpoint. What we are witnessing is that there are a lot of protest movements going on in Iran. The internet has been shut down so that the information cannot come outside. And what we are witnessing in Iran is people are on the streets. Just before a few years, we had protests regarding the women freedom movements in Iran. And now, right now, we have the basis in the economy. People don't have enough to eat. People don't have enough money. The inflation has multiplied a lot. So this is creating real problems for the people. And therefore, people have come on the road. And they are protesting in large numbers. And as a response, the regime of Khamenei, it has killed thousands of people. So again, we have the situation in Israel. It's already volatile. The same situation we have in Iran. The situation is very volatile. And US has been pressurizing Iran. At any moment of time, we can see Western intervention. We can see US intervention in Iran. Now, Iran, the regime is saying that we are fighting on 4 fronts. What are those 4 fronts? It's saying that we are fighting on the economic front. We are fighting with respect to the military aspect. We have our enemies like Israel and US. Then there are terrorist groups which are hampering the overall peace and stability in the region. Then it's saying psychological, that we are also fighting on psychological front because many of the people have been brainwashed by the US. That is what the Iranian regime is talking about. Right. Also, US and Israel see this particular moment as a very good time for changing the Khamenei regime, for making sure that there is a transition towards more democratic processes. But that is, for the time being, it's not that easy. More sanctions and conflicts would result. There would be more sanctions which would be imposed by the US on Iran, and this can also lead to more of conflicts because this could spiral into a regional conflict where Iran is at loggerheads with different countries in the region, maybe Qatar, maybe UAE or other countries. Now, let's talk about Afghanistan, Pakistan and Bangladesh. What is happening in the South Asian construct? When we talk about Afghanistan, especially in the FPAC region, right? If you just look at this particular region, what we are witnessing, see, in Afghanistan in 2021, we had the capture of power by Taliban. Now, the democratic forces, whatever which were established after 2001 in Afghanistan, they have been completely rooted. The democratic structures, parliament, and all those institutions. Now, what we are witnessing is that there has been increasing fundamentalism in Afghanistan. The rights of the minorities, the rights of the women, they are completely curbed. They're not allowed to even get educated. So the situation in Afghanistan is very poor, plus the economic situation is again very poor, right? More so, if you just look at this particular area, the FPAC region, we have the Durand line over here, right, which separates Afghanistan and Pakistan. This region is witnessing a lot of conflicts because we have the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, TTP, attacking the Pakistan army, right? So there has been a kind of a warlike situation between Pakistan army and TTP. So this makes the whole region very volatile. And there has been increasing fundamentalism. So this is also a security threat for India. Next, let's talk about Pakistan. Pakistan had its 27th Constitutional Amendment Act, which has given almost absolute powers to the military chief. So they have restructured the military command structure. And what they have done is that they have created a position of the Chief of Defense Forces, which has the authority over all the three forces, Army, Navy, and the Air Force, right? Asim Munir, Field Marshal Asim Munir, has been declared as the first Chief of Defense Force, and he has been provided with complete lifelong legal immunity. No action, no court case can be filed against him. So this is again what we are witnessing is the increasing authoritarianism. We see since the partition of the country, what we have seen is, except few times, the foreign policy and the overall defense of the country has been guided by the Pakistan army in Pakistan, right? Now this has been made more structured, right? More structured and more formalized through the constitution itself. The civilian government practically has no power over there. And there is weakening of democratic forces. And again, as a bargaining chip against India, US has embraced Pakistan. US has promised to give a lot of defense supplies to Pakistan. Bangladesh, talking about Bangladesh, what we are witnessing, especially after the ouster of the former Prime Minister, Mrs. Sheikh Hasina, what we saw was that there has been, people have been coming on the streets. There have been a street movement, and there have been increasing radicalization, increasing radicalization in Bangladesh. And this has led to the killings of a lot of minorities, Hindu minorities in Bangladesh itself, right? So this is a very important cause of concern. We are going to have elections soon in Bangladesh, but again, what we'll have to understand is the instability in Bangladesh can spread to the states in India, right? The adjoining states in India. So this is a point of concern for India. China's rising strategic confidence. Now this is again very important to understand. US has imposed a lot of tariffs on different countries, including China, India, and all these countries. But one thing which you'll have to understand is whatever tariffs have been imposed by the US on China, it had a very less or negligible impact on China. Primarily because China has become the world's manufacturing base. And in one way or the other, US is also, in one way or the other, critically dependent upon the imports from China. That is what you'll have to understand. And it successfully handled the US tariffs. In fact, you'd be surprised that in 2025 itself, China basically had $1.2 trillion of trade surplus. Can you just imagine? Trade surplus of more than 1.2 trillion US dollars in 2025. So this is a remarkable feat. It's a remarkable achievement, right? It has strengthened the manufacturing and supply chains primarily on the basis of the renewable energy technologies. It is making sure that it continues and it sustains the position of the largest manufacturing base in the world. More than, and again very important, more than 70% of the electric vehicles which were manufactured in the year 2025, they were manufactured in China. Can you even imagine? More than 70% of the world's electric vehicles, they were manufactured in China. More than 500 gigawatts of renewable energy additions, renewable energy capacity was added in China alone. 500 gigawatts. That is the scale to which the Chinese authorities are working, right? Strengthen the manufacturing and supply chains, dominant supply chains also in the countries with respect to the Latin America and Africa. Then dominance with respect to the clean tech and rare earth exports. When we talk about the solar modules, once we talk about the battery storage systems, once we talk about the electric vehicles, China has a complete dominance, the clean technology. Once we talk about the rare earth exports, and this was used by China as a bargaining chip. Once US slapped a lot of tariffs on China, China basically stopped or restricted the supply of rare earths to US, which are the critical components which form the very backbone once we talk about the electric vehicles or the new emerging technologies. So that is what you'll have to understand. And India is critically dependent on China, right? For example, let's talk about the rare earth magnets. Very good example, right? You can also quote this. Whatever example I'm telling you, those should be used in the answer itself, right? So once we talk about the rare earth magnets, we have one of the very important rare earth magnets known as neodymium iron boron, NdFeB. Now this is one of the most important rare earth magnet and almost the soul of any electric vehicle. Very important component. More than 93% of NdFeB, neodymium iron boron, is basically imported from China. And once India was importing this from China, China also asked India to sign, to give assurance that you will not use this in dual tech technologies, in dual use technologies, or in military hardware. So strategically also it is pressurizing India. I hope it's clear. And it is expanding presence in almost every geography. You take the example of Africa, how much it has invested in different domains. You take the example of Latin America, especially in co-producing and co-manufacturing and co-processing the rare earth elements, or ASEAN countries. So it has increased its trade and investments with respect to ASEAN. So it is expanding in almost each and every domain. Now, what are India's foreign policy challenges? There are 4 vectors which you should always keep in mind. Whenever there's a question with respect to especially the great powers, what are the challenges we have? Let's talk about India and US. See, India and US, especially after 1990s, after we started with the liberalization, privatization and globalization reforms, we have shared good relations with each other. But especially after Trump, the first stint of President Trump and this stint of President Trump, because of his fickle attitude, what we have been witnessing is the relations have become a bit bitter, right? At the civil society level, the relations are very good. But at the government level, because US is expecting more from India. As President Trump says that India should do more for US because US is already doing a lot for India according to him. There has been a strategic convergence. When we talk about the Indo-Pacific, we have the same ideology. We believe in the same notion that Indo-Pacific should be free, open and inclusive, right? Free, open and inclusive. And it is for that reason that we have invested significantly in different apparatus, in different instruments, for example, Quad or Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, IPEF, right? Or let's talk about the defense cooperation. We have been great partners once we talk about the defense cooperation. We have signed the 4 foundational agreement, LIMOA, COMCASA, GISOMIA, BECA, right? Also, US designated India as a major defense partner in the year 2017. Also, it issued or it gave the status of Strategic Trade Authorization 1 to India. What it means? That you are a major defense partner for the US and we are giving you the Strategic Trade Authorization. Now, this basically helps India to basically source more of these defense platforms from the US in an easy manner. I hope it is clear, right? But there are strategic frictions. There are frictions. First, on the aspects of trade, which was at a particular point of time very important for President Trump, but now other things have become more important. What he has been saying to India is to cut off the Russian oil supplies. Understand, before the Russia-Ukrainian war started, we were importing around 1 to 2% of our crude oil needs from Russia. But then what happened? The war started. A lot of countries, especially US, imposed a lot of sanctions on Russia. So Russia said to India that we will offer you discounted crude oil price. We'll offer you crude oil at discounted price, at low price. And India agreed to it because India, more than 87% of our oil needs, they are imported. Now, as of November 2025, the share of Russia in the overall energy baskets, it was almost around 35%. US is not liking this. What US is saying is, you are in a way funding the Russia-Ukrainian conflict because you are buying a lot of oil from Russia. And this has been one of the biggest bitter points between India and Russia. And it is also the reason that Russia imposed 50% tariffs on Indian goods which are being exported to the US. And now we have one particular act of the US. US Sanctions on Russia Act of 2025. What it says is, for those countries who are importing Russian oil, they can be slapped tariffs to the tune of 500%. Right? So this is again a grave concern for India. Let's talk about India, China, and primarily in terms of economy. We already discussed before the strategic concerns with respect to the border, but now it is more important to discuss the India-China economic relations. The very first is trade landscape. In the year 2025, the total trade volume which we had was almost to the tune of 155 US billion dollars. Important. ठीक है, अब इसमें इंडिया का डेफिसिट कितना था? इंडिया हैड अ डेफिसिट ऑफ ऑलमोस्ट 116 US billion dollars. Can you imagine? This is absolutely unsustainable. We are in one way or the other, we are critically dependent upon the trade supplies from the China, right? Next, what you'll have to understand is that it is not just normal trade supplies. We are not just talking about the simple or those simple products which we are importing from China. No, it's about the strategic dependencies. Whatever we are importing from China, that is of strategic nature. Let's talk about the electrical machineries. Let's talk about the electronic components. Or let's talk about the active pharmaceutical ingredients which form the very base of medicines. India is the supplier, the largest supplier of generic medicines to African countries, and APIs form the very base of these generic medicines. Or let's talk about the rare earth exports from China, the rare earth elements which form the very base of the clean technologies. And India has been substantially increasing in its investments in renewable energy technologies. So we are critically dependent on China, right? Next thing which you'll have to understand is India-Russia relations, as Russia has been giving India the discounted price, the crude oil at discounted price, but this is not being liked by US. But again, are things very good between Russia and India? See, strategically, we have been very close partners, especially after the 1971 Treaty of Indo-Soviet Treaty of Peace, Friendship, and others. But again, what you'll have to understand is that things are quite restricted. We don't have a diversified trade basket. We are primarily, in 2024, we had a trade of almost 68 US billion dollars. And most of it was because of the imported crude oil, right? So we are not interacting, or we are not having, the exchanges with respect to the trade aspect, with respect to the technology, with respect to the other economic domains, right? Or people-to-people partnerships. Defense platforms, we have most of our defense platforms which are of Russian origin, but their service is being compromised, primarily because of the conflict of Russia-Ukraine, right? So many of the spare parts which we used to get from Russia, they have been delayed, primarily because there is war going on and Russia is not able to provide us the timely delivery of those important spare components with respect to these defense platforms. You talk about the Sukhoi, you talk about the Kalashnikov rifles, assault rifles, or you even talk about the S-400 Triumph missile defense system, everything. Then we have India-Pakistan and regional stability. What we have been witnessing with respect to Pakistan is the rise in the military dominance. Over there, Asim Munir has, the Field Marshal Asim Munir practically has all the power in his control. Civilian setup is almost absent. Then US-Pakistan engagement. This is also a concern for India. Why? Because US has been giving a lot of funds to Pakistan. Initially, it said that Pakistan was fighting war against terror. But later, it was found out that Osama bin Laden was himself was given a shelter by the Pakistani authorities. So this is a point of caution. But US has been using it as a bargaining chip to basically pressurize India in one way or the other. So this is a cause of concern. What should be the way forward for India? We should focus upon the economic resilience strategy. There is no doubt about it. We have already come up with the different schemes, production-linked incentive schemes for different products, but this must be expanded. For example, the hardware component of the data centers. Or let's talk about the printed circuit boards. or let's talk about any of the semiconductors. So PLI scheme must be expanded to these critical strategic sectors, right? Then we have the semiconductor mission. This must, the funding, the overall structure, the implementing agencies, they must be made more robust so as to give impetus to the semiconductor mission. This should not just be on the paper, rather this should be converted into reality as soon as possible. Then we have the MSMEs, very important component. MSMEs, what we often say is that they are the lifeblood of the Indian economy, right? More than 40% of India's exports are done by the MSMEs. So adequate attention has to be given as far as the disbursal of credit is concerned, as far as the upgradation of technology is concerned, as far as the social security benefits to these MSMEs is concerned. So we need to focus upon these MSMEs. Then India's defense modernization is again one of the areas which is in the need of dire attention. Government has been doing a lot, it has done a lot, but there is a need for strategic reforms, maybe in the form of the theater commands, right? Tell me, where do we have theater command in India? Do we have, first of all, and if yes, where do we have that? Then what we should focus more aggressively upon is the defense corridors. We already have plans with respect to defense corridors in UP and Tamil Nadu, but that should be expanded to other places also, right? We cannot be perpetually dependent on other countries as far as our critical defense needs are concerned. Then we have manufacturing push. So what we should be doing is, let's come into collaborative agreements with different countries around the world. Why just buy from them? Why can't we have joint ventures where different countries come and establish together and we share the benefits together, right? For example, the best example is BrahMos, right? So on that similar lines, we can definitely go for other defense platforms. Then economic diplomacy. We'll have to focus upon supply chain diversification. There is no doubt about it. We cannot be critically dependent for such important components on just one country, and that too a country which is having adversarial relations with India, China, right? So we cannot do that. When we talk about the rare earths, when we talk about the active pharmaceutical ingredients or high technology, we need to diversify the basket. We need to diversify the basket, not just for the finished products, but also for the raw materials, so that we can basically do the value addition in India itself, right? And then after we are done with that, we'll be also able to export those products to different countries around the world, right? Then we have energy security. We already know that more than 87% of our crude oil needs are primarily done through the imports. So this is a high time that we focus upon the energy sovereignty aspect. I'm not saying energy security, energy sovereignty aspect. And therefore, we should focus upon the strategic petroleum reserves, very core component, and the diversification. See, if it's no wrong, if US is saying that you need to buy oil from us, if it is offering a good price, definitely we can do that. We need to diversify the basket. We cannot be dependent on just few regions, especially once we talk about the Middle East, Strait of Hormuz, this is witnessing a flashpoint. This is witnessing a kind of tumultuous situation because of the war, the Iranian crisis. So we need to diversify. That's very, very important. Soft power and cultural diplomacy. This is one of the areas where China has invested significantly. It has made sure that in every part of the world, it has its consulate, it has its diplomatic mission over there, and it is spreading the Chinese values, the civilizational values. India has more to offer as far as the soft power is concerned. So why not we invest more in our, let's say, the foreign services officers, give more positions, open more positions in different countries. It would definitely require some amount of investments, but that is really needed. And also we have a lot of diaspora, those Indian origin people living outside. So they can be a source of funding. They can provide us the fund, and definitely that can be used in the overall development. South-South cooperation. As India says that we are going to be the voice of the global South. So we should basically manifest it by coming up in partnerships with different countries, especially the African countries or Latin American countries, which are in dire needs of skill development or health investments, right? Or in education investments. Issue-based partnerships. We can basically talk about the climate. We can talk about the trade aspects. Let's say we don't share good relations with China, but at least on trade-related aspects, we can talk about the reforms in the WTO, and China would definitely accompany India. So we can have issue-based partnerships, right? Digital governance, where India has its solid strength. When we talk about the digital public interface, right? Digital public infrastructure. So let's talk about the India stack or Aadhaar or Jan Dhan Aadhaar, mobile, right? Jam Trinity. So we need to capitalize it. We need to showcase to the world that yes, we have the power and we can definitely guide different countries around the world. So what we are trying to say is, as of now, the whole situation remains very fragmented, primarily because of the great power politics. But India has a lot of options. India has options, and India should also invest internally. We'll have to make ourselves internally strong. We'll have to make sure our economy is strong. We'll have to make sure that our military is strong, and we'll have to make sure that our diplomacy is strong, right? Only then India can become the voice of the global south and as a Vishwaguru. I hope it is clear. Let's have a mains practice question. The current world order reflects a shift from rules-based governance to power-based politics. Elaborate with reference to regional dynamics, different areas we have discussed. In this context, also discuss the challenges to India's foreign policy and suggest a way forward. With respect to the content which is provided today, you can easily write a very good answer of 15 marks and 250 words. Do write, and yes, if you're liking the discussion, do not forget to press the like button and also let us know in the comments. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to the importance of PEC Silica for India. You must have heard about the emerging technologies in the form of artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud computing, quantum computing, or in the domain of renewable energy, we have the renewable energy technologies, we have the battery storage systems. All these emerging technologies, their hardware, require certain elements, certain minerals in the form of platinum, cobalt, lithium, or rare earth element in the form of neodymium, right? Lanthanide series. Now, these elements or these minerals, they are not present everywhere around the world. They are present at certain locations. Now, since these technologies have become more important, they are the strategic tool for different countries, automatically these elements and minerals have become more important. Now, once we talk about the dominance with respect to the overall reserves, the overall production of these critical minerals, it is with China. More so once we talk about the processing aspect. Dekho, having reserves is a different thing, right? India also has a lot of reserves. But the point is how well or how efficiently you are able to process. Because the processing of these critical minerals, it's a very intensive process. It's a very technologically intensive process. There are a lot of stages which are involved. And that is the reason we haven't been able to develop those technologies as of now. Those economic or viable technologies as of now. We're talking about India. Now, considering this, since China already has a dominance with respect to the production and the processing of these critical minerals, US has come up with a new initiative, primarily to counter China, primarily to counter the supply chains with respect to these critical minerals which are dominated by China. Simple as that. Itna dhyan mein rakhiye. And the name of the initiative is PAX Silica. Silica, you can understand, it's derived from silicon, right? So it's not just focusing upon silicon, which is a very important component of semiconductors, but rather it is also focusing upon the other critical minerals. One thing very important to understand, कि भाई critical minerals होते क्या हैं? Critical minerals, as I said, we have lithium, we have cobalt, we have chromium, we have so many others, which form the very base in these emerging technologies, electronic equipments and all that. This also has a subset. It also includes subset known as rare earth elements, including the rare earth magnets. So rare earth elements is a subset of critical mineral. Always remember that. We have the lanthanide series, right? We have the neodymium and others. China again has a dominance with respect to the rare earth elements, right? So India, this particular article, which has been featured in the Hindu, it talks about that how India can become a partner in this particular initiative. And it can also make sure that it secures the overall supply chain with respect to critical minerals. As of now, US has basically not included India, right? It has included only selected group of countries. So let's go through this. So on December 12th, 2025, the US convened the first PAX Silica Summit to basically secure the supply chains of critical minerals. Because US is also intensively investing in the development of these emerging technologies, and it needs the raw material for that. So it also needs to secure the supply chain. Simple as that. It cannot be just reliant on the imports from the China, right? And that too in the case when China can use it as a strategic tool. It can basically cut the exports of these critical minerals to the US, and that would harm the US interest, right? Then strengthen the semiconductors and AI manufacturing. In the AI, and this is, again, understand, whenever we talk about the technological domain, especially in the information technology, US has been the superpower. You talk about Google, you talk about Microsoft, though they are handled or they have been managed by the Indian citizens or the people of Indian origin. But again, in reality, most of these dominated platforms, as far as the information technology is concerned, they are of US origin. US is making sure that even in artificial intelligence, it remains at the top position, right? Even though it is being challenged by China, but again, it remains at the very top position, and for that, it requires robust supplies of these critical minerals. Build trusted digital infrastructure all over the world. For example, we have the Starlink, right? For example, we have the US GPS communication, the most important, right? Most spread. Reduce coercive economic dependencies. Right, so it wants to basically reduce its dependencies on countries, specifically like China. Who all are the countries? Before that, let's also talk about the criticality of minerals. देखिए, जो criticality होती है, the criticality of minerals, it's not something which is constant. In 1947, a particular element or a particular mineral maybe would have been very important for the US at that point of time. Maybe it's not that important as of now, right? So criticality changes with time, and it primarily depends upon two factors: the economic importance and the supply risk with respect to that particular mineral. I hope it is clear. Now, who all are the member countries? We have the US, which is basically looking after the domains of tech leadership, artificial intelligence, semiconductor design. Then we have Japan, which is basically maintaining the advanced manufacturing, right? Japan has a lot of these supply chains. Japan is having a lot of these assembly lines, so it is having a command over the manufacturing aspect. Then Australia, largest lithium exporter, so it has a lot of reserves, right? Rare earth reserves, not just lithium but others also. Then Netherlands. Why such a small country like Netherlands? Because we have the ASML, Amsterdam Semiconductors Manufacturing Limited. So this, again, understand, this has a monopoly. It has a monopoly with respect to the EUV lithography machines, extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, and this is the only company or the only enterprise in the world which is the sole manufacturers of EUV machines. EUV machines are the core component for manufacturing the semiconductors, the fabs, which you must have heard about. So यहाँ पर इसका monopoly है. It has a complete monopoly. Advanced chip lithography. Lithography is the printing on the chips. Then we have South Korea, which is providing the memory chips, the printed circuit boards. Singapore, which is doing the semiconductor manufacturing hub. Israel, AI, defense tech, cybersecurity, master in that. UK, third largest AI market. Then we have Qatar and UAE, largest investment funds. They have the money. They have the money. The sheikhs over there, they have the money, right? AI ecosystem. And we have certain other countries, for example, Canada, EU, OECD, and Taiwan as observers. Taiwan, we already know that it is also one of the dominant players as far as the semiconductor manufacturing is concerned. But India, as of now, it doesn't have, according to the US, it doesn't have anything to offer. And that's the reason US did not invite India in the very first summit, right? And this is something which many of the people in India, they have been concerned about this particular aspect. Now, why pack silica? Why US has come? We already talked about this. China dominates the rare earth element supply chain, and it controls the overall exports. Not just the production and processing aspect, it is controlling the overall exports of these REs. And this has been used by China as a strategic leverage, as a tool to make sure that countries do according to what China says. That if you will not do this, we will stop the exports of REs, rare earth elements, to your country, which form the very backbone of the emerging technologies, right? Key incidents, what have been the incidents? China restricted the rare earth elements exports after the US tariff, already discussed. India faced shortages of rare earth magnets. So India, as I said, that when we talk about NdFeB, neodymium iron boron magnets, the rare earth magnets, more than 93%, and they're the core component of the electric vehicles. More than 93% is imported from China. So that is the critical dependency which we have, right? India had to give assurance to China that we will not use this in dual technologies, in dual tech, which can be used. What is dual tech? Which can be used either for the civilian purposes and also for military purposes. We had to give in writing, and also will not use in the military purpose, right? What have been the lessons from COVID-19? After COVID-19 or during COVID-19, what we observed, once the world was at halt, once the overall production supply chains were stopped by China, there was a complete chaos around the world because almost every country was dependent upon the Chinese supply chain. So we had to come up with our own initiatives. India, Japan, Australia launched the supply chain resilience initiative, or the Quad launched the critical minerals initiative, right? So this is very important. Similarly, we have come up with the Pax Silica initiative. What India brings to Pax Silica? If India is incorporated as a country, what can India offer? India has a very strong, and this is something which we really need to be proud of. Even those developed countries like Germany or France, they don't have this kind of system like UPI or something, which we have, right? Even a normal vendor on the street knows how to basically use it. So this is a very big achievement for India. Once we talk about the India stack, which comprises of the Aadhaar enabled payment system, the Aadhaar biometric, the Jandhan Aadhaar mobile, Jam Trinity. So this is something which is our strength. So we need to utilize it, and this can be a guiding light for the other countries. Then rapidly expanding the AI market. We have a lot of startups in the country. For example, the Sarvam AI, right? We have a lot of these AI startups coming and investing a lot in the GPUs, graphic processing units. The India AI mission, it has been focusing upon providing the GPUs, graphic processing units, manufactured by NVIDIA or something like that, different companies, to different startups in the country, because these are very expensive, right? Then we have the AI mission, semiconductor mission with large funding, investments by Tata Group. So we have the indigenous companies. Recently, Mukesh Ambani announced that we are going to invest substantially in the overall indigenous AI development in India. Then we have growing AI startup ecosystem, large pool of highly trained engineers returning from the US. Yes, there is, according to some reports, what has been witnessed is many of those high techies who are working in US or in the other developed countries, they are now coming back to India because the government is offering incentives if they come here and invest in the startups or do something. So the government is offering SOPs. So this is a good news. Existing collaborations with Japan, Singapore, and Israel. We already have technological collaborations with different countries, including Japan, Singapore, and Israel. This can be used for the advantage of different countries in the Pax Silica initiative if India becomes a part of it. What are the key challenges? The very first is the strategic position of India. See, all these countries, they are developed countries. They are developed, they have good resource base with them. If they do not have any kind of technology, they have a lot of money with them. For example, Qatar or UAE, right? India doesn't have that, right? It would be the first developing country and first non-US ally member. So this is going to be difficult for India. Second, it may antagonize China. Yes. As of now, India is not a member. And China has been exporting the rare earth elements to India comfortably. At some times, definitely, there have been hindrances. But if India joins Pax Silica, then this would be a cause of concern for China. And there it might get, agitated. And this can affect the supplies of the critical minerals to India. Then strategic autonomy. Yes. If India joins this, there would be conditions, especially once you have President Trump, there would be conditions imposed on India. And this can, as for example, he is asking for Russian crude oil, to stop the Russian crude oil. And this is something which concerns the national interest of India. So if India joins this particular initiative, definitely there can be some conditions which can be imposed by these countries, and this would affect the strategic autonomy of India. Industrial policy conflict, because India would seek to protect its domestic firms. India would want to provide subsidies. It would not be able to open its market, because otherwise it would lead to the hindering or the hampering of the interests of the domestic manufacturers. But this may not be allowed. This may face resistance from the countries of the Pax Silica members. Then limited exploration and technology gaps. Yes. Though we have a lot of reserves, according to US Geological Survey itself, India has one of the largest reserves of these critical minerals in the world. But we haven't been able to utilize it, primarily because of lack of exploration and technological gaps. We have not invested in the technological aspect, the exploration part. And we have weak recycling system. We have a lot of these electronic equipments which are discarded, but we are not recycling them. Because if we do proper recycling, we can extract a lot of these critical minerals from these used or discarded electronic products. But we are not doing that. What should be the way forward? India should engage more deeply with the countries who are involved in Pax Silica. And most of these countries are having good relations with India. So definitely, India should use it for its own strategic advantage. Balanced participation with protection of strategic autonomy. Very, very important. we have always said, we have always based our Indian foreign policy on the principle of strategic autonomy. We cannot dilute that. That must be kept in mind. We need to tell them that what are our core interests, and then we can proceed. Strengthen the domestic semiconductor and AI ecosystems. We have been doing it through National Semiconductor Mission. We have been doing it through the India AI Mission. So what is really needed is incorporation of the private players and increase in the overall funding. Carefully manage the relations with both China and Western technology blocs. Make sure that if you even join it, you should not antagonize China. Simple as that. Because if you do so, then definitely the supplies of these elements to India from China can be reduced. And that would not be in India's favor. I hope it's clear. Let's have a mains practice question, a 10-marker question, 150 words, small. The emergence of PEC Silica reflects the growing strategic importance of semiconductors, rare earth elements, and artificial intelligence in global geopolitics. Discuss the objectives of PEC Silica and examine its implications for India's strategic autonomy and technological development. Simple. Just write this particular answer, going to be very helpful. Let's go to the next section. Coming to the simplified section, we have the very first topic which talks about the increasing dependence of people on Gutkha and other intoxicants. We have this particular column which has been published in the Indian Express, which says that more and more people are spending on Gutkha and other intoxicants, and their overall spending with respect to these things, it is increasing, and it is compromising the overall welfare objectives of the nation, right? According to the Household Consumption Expenditure Survey of 2023-24, tobacco consumption is rising fast, spreading wider and embedding itself into deeper in the lives of the people and poorer households. Per capita spending on tobacco rose sharply between 2011-12 and 2023-24 by 58%. Per capita spending on tobacco in rural India, and even steeper 77% in urban areas. What it means is that the consumption of tobacco in the rural and urban areas has significantly increased. Tobacco now accounts for almost 1.5% of monthly per capita consumption expenditure (MPC) in rural areas and 1% in urban areas. That too is significant. Don't just look at the absolute number, 1%. But if you compare on the overall monthly per capita expenditure, 1% is being spent in the tobacco. In rural India, tobacco consuming households increased from 9.9 crores, 59.3% of all the households, to 13.3 crores, 68.6%. So the number of households, number of people who are consuming tobacco is increasing, and therefore subsequently the number of households. A 33% rise in just over a decade. Urban India shows an even more dramatic increase of 59%. Tobacco consuming households jumped from 2.8 crores to 4.7 crores. Tobacco use is no longer confined to traditional pockets or demographics. It is becoming mainstream across rural and urban India. In the rural areas, the surge is driven primarily by Gutkha and the leaf tobacco use. In cities, cigarette consumption has increased sharply, but Gutkha has followed close behind. Today, 41% of all rural tobacco expenditure goes towards Gutkha, making it the single largest tobacco product by value. Single largest tobacco product by value is Gutkha. Cigarettes remain the most widely consumed tobacco products in cities, used by 18.1% of urban households. That too is significant, almost 20%. Gutkha consumption is concentrated in India's central belt, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Chhattisgarh and Rajasthan, where prevalence far exceeds the national average of around 30%. Tobacco use in India is increasingly concentrated among the poor households. This is also important, and therefore they have to bear the brunt of the non-communicable disease also, subsequent non-communicable disease. In rural areas, more than 70% of the households in the bottom 40% of the income distribution consume tobacco. Poorer rural households spend a larger share of their monthly per capita expenditure on tobacco than the top 20%, right? Across both the rural and urban settings, tobacco consumption remains highest among the poorest and lowest among the wealthiest. That is also a point of caution, understanding that we have most of the consumption of tobacco is among the poorest. The wealthiest are not consuming that. The health consequences of this trajectory are well known and devastating. The Ministry of Health and Family Welfare estimates that nearly 13 lakhs deaths annually, 1.3 million deaths annually in India are because of tobacco use. not every data which is given in this article is important, but yes, if there's a question with respect to tobacco usage in the country, with respect to the health aspect, definitely some of the data points can be used. The importance of data lies that you just use that much amount of data which can increase the clarity of your argument. Simple as that. Not every kind of data is important. Tobacco is a leading risk factor for non-communicable disease such as cardiovascular ailments, respiratory illnesses. We have cardiac arrest, we have heart attacks because of that, cancer and hypertension. NCDs account for 63% of all deaths in India. More than around 2/3 of the total deaths in India are because of the non-communicable disease. And this percentage has increased from 1990s. Initially, most of the deaths in India were primarily because of the communicable diseases, infectious diseases. Now, the infectious disease have come down. And the non-communicable disease, primarily because of what we call them as a lifestyle disease, it is increasing. Interaction between rising tobacco use and expanding public healthcare coverage. Ayushman Bharat was designed as a safety net for vulnerable families against the catastrophic health expenditure. As of October 2025, over 42 crore Ayushman cards have been issued, covering almost 12 crore families. The scheme has already helped households save estimated 1.52 lakh crore in out-of-pocket expenditure. Out-of-pocket, which people have to bear, right? Without the insurance, without the government support and others. Government health expenditure as a share of total spending rose from 29% to 48% between financial year 15 to financial year 22, while the out-of-pocket expenditure fell sharply. When tobacco use concentrated among the poor households drives chronic disease, the cost increases because the poor, first of all, they have limited amount of money. Then they have to spend in the overall healthcare aspects. So they don't have even enough for their livelihood or for their subsistence aspects. Tobacco products generated just 2.4% of the gross tax revenue in 2023, financial year 2023. While the Central Excise Amendment Bill of 2025 proposes a hike in the duties, raising the levy on chewing tobacco alone will not suffice. Regulatory oversight must be strengthened. Surrogate advertising continues unabated. Surrogate means that in one form or the other, you must have seen that we have the indirect advertisements for alcohol in the form of the packaged mineral water, the same brands which are basically having the alcohol, right? They are having the advertisement in the form of the packaged mineral water. Similarly, for the Gutkha products, with leading Bollywood celebrities promoting Gutkha and Pan Masala. You already know we have these three stars, the famous stars, Shah Rukh Khan and all that. They are basically, in a one way or the other, they are promoting this particular thing. In rural India, the bottom 40% households, this is very important data. The bottom 40% households spend just 2.5% of the monthly per capita expenditure on education, while spending 4% on pan, tobacco and intoxicants. They are spending less on education and health and more on this particular thing. Less on education and more on intoxicants and these tobacco products. A welfare state cannot credibly champion human capital development while allowing addictive products to crowd out spending on education, nutrition and health. Very important. So let's also talk about the household consumption expenditure survey. First of all, what you'll have to understand is that this is carried out by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Now this was for the year 23 and 24. Right, let's talk about the HCES, Household Consumption Expenditure Survey, is designed to collect information on consumption and expenditure of the households on goods and services. The survey provides data required to assess trends in the economic well-being and to determine and update the basket of consumer goods and services and weights used for the calculation of Consumer Price Index, CPI, which forms the very basis for the Reserve Bank of India in its monetary policy framework. Data collected in the HCES are also used to measure poverty, inequality and social exclusion. The monthly per capita expenditure is compiled from HCES, is a primary indicator used for most of the analytical purposes. You can just have a look. One of the findings is very important. The average monthly per capita expenditure in rural and urban India in 2023-24 has been estimated to be 4,122 and 6,996. 4,000, around 4,000 for rural areas and around 7,000 for the urban areas. At all India level, the urban-rural gap in MPC has declined to 71% in 22-23 from 84% in 2011-12. Next, we have the National Tobacco Control Program. Government of India launched the NTCP, National Tobacco Control Program, in the year 2007-8. in the 11th Fifth Year Plan with the aim to create awareness about the harmful effects of tobacco consumption, reduce the production and supply of tobacco products, ensure effective implementation of the provisions of, this is important, the Cigarettes and Other Tobacco Products Prohibition of Advertisement and Regulation of Trade and Commerce Production Supply Act of 2003. That is why you see through this particular act, it has been mandated that on the cigarette packets you have the warning. What percentage of warning would be there, that is decided by this particular act. Help people to quit tobacco use, facilitate the implementation of strategies for prevention and control of tobacco advocated by WHO framework. Look at the ministry is Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and these are the thrust areas for NTCP. So you can just have a look. That's it for this particular topic. Let's go to the next. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to the Commission on Air Quality Management in the NCR region. Now, this has launched a particular study, the apportionment study, that is to know that which all are the pollution sources in the NCR region. The Commission for Air Quality Management, the pollution watchdog for the Delhi NCR, has said that source apportionment study has been launched to prepare a new inventory of emissions. The study will employ high-resolution mapping to track the sources from households, heating to crop residue burning, the stubble burning which we talk about in what we call as the burning of the parali, right, the leftover of that particular harvested crop, to strengthen the region's decision support system, a real-time tool to keep a tab on Delhi's dynamic pollution sources. The move comes after CAQM's expert panel noted that different studies often yielded different results. We had some studies by IIT Kanpur, then some studies by IITM, then some studies by different institutes, and all of them said that there are different sources of pollution, apportionment studies. So we don't have a conclusive aspect to it, that which are all the contributing sources. So we need a more robust study. Different locations, different chemical constituents analyzed, and different modeling assumptions. The Supreme Court mandated panel emphasized that unified data-driven approach is essential to reduce the emission uncertainty and support the effective air quality management. The Indian Express had reported last month that a consortium of institutions led by the Automotive Research Association of India, important body, can be asked in the examination, a research body affiliated with the Ministry of Heavy Industries. Look, that is how the newspaper itself gives you the answer. So it can ask that under which ministry the Automotive Research and Association of India is. So it's a research body under Ministry of Heavy Industries, has been tasked with a study aimed at preparing a new emission inventory. The Commission said that the findings of the new study will be integrated in the air quality early warning system and decision support system to get more accurate and real-time data. The consortium, the group of institutes, we also have the other players, which also includes the IIT Delhi, TERI, IITM Pune, Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, will also map the emissions on high resolution, that is 500 meter by 500 meter grid, right? So that is what you'll have to understand. Let's also talk about the Commission on Air Quality Management. The CAQM is a statutory body, remember, established under the Commission for Air Quality Management in the National Capital Region and Adjoining Areas Act of 2021. The mandate is better coordination, research, identification and resolution of problems with respect to the air quality index and for matters connected therewith. It undertakes the action for the prevention and control of air pollution in the Delhi NCR and adjoining areas. This also includes the parts of these adjoining states, including UP, Rajasthan, right, and Haryana, which impacts the air quality of the National Capital Territory of Delhi. The Commission is required to coordinate its action on monitoring of air quality with the government of Delhi and adjoining states, which include Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, and Uttar Pradesh. Do remember, important. Restricting the activities. You must have seen the GRAP. The GRAP 4 was revoked. Graded response action plan. As the pollution would increase, we would have the severity of the actions, the stringency, the strictness of the actions with respect to curbing the pollutions would also increase, right? So we have a graded response towards the increasing pollution, what we call as the GRAP, Graded Response Action Plan. And this is basically implemented by CAQM. Just remember that. Investigating and conducting research related to the environment pollution, which it is doing, which in the same article, it has been said that it has launched a particular study. Issuing directions on matters including inspections or regulations. All the directions and orders by the Commission are of binding nature. Important. You cannot ignore it. The states have to accept. The commission is directly accountable to the parliament. Composition: the chairperson is to be chaired by the government official of the rank of secretary or the chief secretary. He'll hold the post for 3 years or until he or she attains the age of 70 years. It will also have 5 ex officio members who are either the chief secretaries or secretaries in charge of the department dealing with the environment protection in the states of Delhi, Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh. 5 states, remember. 3 full-time technical members, 3 members from the non-governmental organization, technical members from the CPCB, ISRO and Niti Aayog. I hope it is clear. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, we have this particular article which talks about the Enforcement Directorate. The ED has taken a lot of action, especially in those states which are ruled by the opposition parties. And over there, the state governments, what they have said is that ED is acting as a juristic person, which ideally it's not supposed to do. It is a statutory body and it is not supposed to act in a juristic manner. And we'll see what this particular thing is all about. The Supreme Court on Tuesday decided to examine the petitions filed by the state of Kerala and Tamil Nadu asking if Enforcement Directorate, a central agency, is a juristic person who can approach high courts for the enforcement of its right. It is a statutory body, we understand. But is it a juristic person which can go to the high courts to enforce the rights and call for the writs? A juristic person is a legal fiction by which a non-human like an incorporated company is recognized to have rights, duties, sue or be sued like a natural person. Kerala said that ED cannot consider itself as a person but is only a statutory creation. The train of events began with ED filing a writ petition under Article 226 of the Constitution before the Kerala High Court. So we have the writs. The Supreme Court is authorized under the Article 32 of the Indian Constitution, right to constitutional remedies, to issue writs. And then we also have the High Courts. They can also issue writs. Always understand, always remember that the writ jurisdiction of Supreme Court is lower or narrower than that of the High Courts. Because Supreme Court can only issue writs for the enforcement of the fundamental rights. So High Courts, on the other hand, can issue writs also for the enforcement of fundamental rights, including that of the ordinary legal rights. So remember that. The agency had challenged a notification issued by the state in May 2021, setting up a commission of inquiry to investigate an audio clip and a letter from the 2 accused persons in the gold smuggling case. Tamil Nadu accused the ED of indulging in a gross and blatant abuse of the process of law by invoking the writ jurisdiction of the Madras High Court, seeking mandamus for the registration of a case relating to alleged illegal mining. So ED is seeking the writ of mandamus from the Madras High Court in a case of alleged illegal mining. So that is a question which these states, Tamil Nadu and Kerala, are asking, that is it a juristic person? Is ED a juristic person? It argued that ED's writs in the High Court were unmaintainable, right? And it is up to the Supreme Court to decide. Let's talk about the Enforcement Directorate. Before that, we have the money laundering, right? Money laundering is a process where you have the proceeds of the illegal actions, let's say human trafficking or arms trafficking or any other illegal activity. The proceeds of it are basically converted. The black money is converted as a white money. And we have certain steps which are basically a part of converting black money into the white money, the laundering process. We have the placement, then we have the layering, and then we have the integration. Do remember these words. You can also just have a look. This is what the process of money laundering is all about. Let's talk about the Enforcement Directorate. The Directorate of Enforcement or Enforcement Directorate is a domestic law enforcement agency and economic intelligence agency. It is responsible for enforcing the economic laws and fighting the economic crimes in India, right? The origin of ED goes back to 1956 when an enforcement unit was formed handling the exchange control laws violations under the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. In 57, the unit was renamed as Enforcement Directorate. The nodal ministry is the Department of Revenue, Ministry of Finance. Why it is important to know the parent ministry is because UPSC has been asking this particular question, that what is a parent ministry for this particular body, and I'll give you the example also. Objectives of ED. So it primarily makes sure it implements 3 important laws. We have the Foreign Exchange Management Act, FEMA. Then we have the Prevention of Money Laundering Act of 2002, PMLA, and Fugitive Economic Offenders Act of 2018. The implementation of these 3 laws is with the Enforcement Directorate. It also files its own sort of record, which is the ECIR, which means Enforcement Case Information Report. Now, this is not something which is similar to the FIR, but this is for its own processes. for its own internal process. And once it files a ECIR, it can then basically use this particular document to basically attach properties, right? To give summons to different people. This is what you have to know, and why I told this is important. Look at this question of 2025. It has asked Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, it has asked Directorate of Enforcement, and the body. Just see. So please make sure that you give importance to the parent ministry or the department or the any of the body once you are going through any of the organization or institutions, and also give me the answer for this particular question. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, we have a news coming from UK, where it has agreed to give back the Chagos archipelago to Mauritius, but with a condition that it would maintain the 99 years lease with respect to Diego Garcia, the island, the strategic island where you have the US base, the US naval base, very important. The United Kingdom and the Mauritius signed a deal in May 2025 to give Mauritius sovereignty over the Chagos Island after 2 centuries under British control. Though the UK will lease back the Diego Garcia, where the UK base is located, for at least 99 years. So it would give back the Chagos archipelago, but the control over the Diego Garcia would be with the US naval base, right? Because there is a 99 years lease. The UK kept control of the Chagos Island after Mauritius gained independence from Britain in 1960s, but it evicted thousands of Chagos Islanders who have since mounted a series of legal claims for compensation in British courts. Let's go through this particular thing, very important. What are Chagos Island? They are the archipelago group of islands in the Indian Ocean. Over here, you can just have a look. We have India over here, and then we have the Chagos Island over here near Mauritius. Located about 5,800 miles southeast of UK and about 1,250 miles northeast of Mauritius. They became British territory along with Mauritius in 1814 as a part of the Treaty of Paris after the defeat of Napoleon. The group of islands were designated as British Indian Ocean Territory, BIOT, in 1965 and detached from Mauritius, which became independent in 1968. The deal then was that the islands would return to Mauritius once they were no longer needed for the Britain's defense. A joint UK-US military base was built on the largest of the islands, known as Diego Garcia. Displaced residents were resettled in Mauritius and Seychelles, while some were relocated to the UK in 2002. Why they are being returned to Mauritius now? Since 1980s, Mauritius has claimed sovereignty over the islands and pursued its case through the international courts and tribunals. In 2019, the International Court of Justice, ICJ, the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, ruled in a non-binding judgment that the process of decolonization of Mauritius was not lawfully completed when it was granted the independence in 1968, and that the UK was under an obligation to bring to an end to its administration of the archipelago as rapidly as possible. What has happened since that ruling? Under the government led by Rishi Sunak, a conservative prime minister, it was announced in 2022 that UK and Mauritius had agreed to begin negotiations on the exercise of sovereignty over the Chagos archipelago. It was argued that Britain's defense was best served by having a legal certainty over the Chagos Islands due to the risk of continued challenges in the international courts. It was an acknowledgement that UK respected the international law. The UK government stressed that the agreement would ensure the continued effective operation of the joint UK-US military base in Diego Garcia. The Conservative government held 11 rounds of negotiations with the Mauritian before the general elections of 2024. After the Labour won the summer elections, the two governments published a joint statement in 2024 announcing that a political agreement had been reached. The treaty was formally approved and signed by Starmer and his counterpart, the Mauritian Prime Minister. Starmer said that if the deal was vital, as the UK would not have a realistic prospect of success if the Mauritius pursued legal action. He explained that UK could have faced provisional measures order within a matter of weeks. The UK could just ignore such orders, but without an agreement, it would have legal grounds to prevent China or other nations from establishing bases on the outer islands conducting joint exercises near Diego Garcia, it was claimed. What are the terms of deal? Mauritius takes sovereignty of the islands, but the UK maintains the initial 99 years lease of Diego Garcia with an option of extension. The UK will pay for that lease. The average annual cost during the initial 99 years period of the treaty is estimated by Whitehall to be almost £101 million sterling in 2025-26 prices. The total projected cost of the finance package using a net present value of the methodology would be around £3.4 billion sterling. although some argue it could be higher. So this is what you have to understand. Note the geography, that is important. Diego Garcia would remain as a US base, but the other archipelago would be, the sovereignty would be transferred to Mauritius. Let's go to the last article. Coming to the last article of today's discussion, we have an article which talks about the issue with respect to the copper crunch. So we already discussed the Pax Silica initiative. Now what we're talking about is the issue of copper. Copper is something which again forms one of the very important component of the EV. Since we are developing EV, and that is on a global scale, we are manufacturing the EVs, electric vehicles, we also need more of copper, and that is a strategic concern. The global shift towards electric vehicles is widely celebrated as a technological breakthrough and a vital step towards greener future. However, there lies a growing and underappreciated challenge: impending copper crunch. Copper is indispensable for electrification and forms the backbone of EV batteries, motors, wiring, charging infrastructure, and power grids. Between 15 and 25, the global EV sales rose from approximately 0.55 million units to estimated 20 million units, while associated copper consumption surged from roughly 27.5 thousand tons to over 1.28 million tons. So there has been a kind of increase in multiple terms, showing copper to be the hidden backbone of EV revolution. Consequently, a structural supply deficit could emerge as early as 2026, reshaping the global trade, intensifying the geopolitical competition, and influencing the cost and pace of EV adoption. With EVs requiring 4 to 5 times more copper than the internal combustion vehicles. This is also important to understand. EVs require more copper, more of these critical minerals as compared to the internal combustion engines vehicles. No viable large-scale substitutes available. This synchrony underscores the persistent structural demand pressure which we have. In 2024, the global supply is expected to exceed demand by approximately 0.3 million tons. But by 2026, the demand is projected to reach 30 million tons and supply lags at around 28 million tons. So this 0.3 would be converted to 2 million tons. The gap would be of 2 million tons. This gap is expected to widen to 4.5 million tons by 2028 and nearly to 8 million tons by 2030, equivalent to the output of the world's 10 largest copper mines combined. So it's not just those specific rare earth elements. We are also talking about some common minerals like copper, which are really needed for the robust production of the EVs, right? Such shortages could increase the EV costs and delay the development of the charging infrastructure and strain the decarbonization targets. More important, what you'll have to understand is that we have a lot of waste. We have a lot of electronic equipment. We have a lot of waste, discarded electrical machinery. Why not we focus upon the recycling infrastructure? Recycling is therefore very, very important. As electrification accelerates, the copper scarcity may become the main bottleneck unless mining, recycling, and material innovation are rapidly scaled up. The geography of EV-ridden copper consumption signals a major shift in the global power balance, with China emerging as a dominant force in the electric vehicle adoption. China's EV-related copper demand surged from almost 78,000 in 2020 to nearly 678,000 in 2024. Just in 4 years, look at the increase from 78,000 tons to almost 680,000 tons in just 4 years. And is projected to reach almost around 780,000 tons by 2025, accounting for almost 60% of global EV-based copper consumption. Almost 70% of the global electric vehicles are being manufactured in China, right? That is the scale to which they are producing things. This dominance is driven not just by strong EV sales, but also China's control over 70% of the global battery cell production and its deeply integrated supply chain. By 2025, the EV-related copper demand is expected to reach approximately 210,000 tons in the European Union and 114,000 tons in the US, while India remains modest at roughly 7,200 tons. Look at the demand of India. It's just in thousands, few thousands, and look at what you have for China, for what you have for Europe, and what you have for US. This asymmetry provides China with a structural advantage in terms of pricing power, long-term supply contracts, and strategic leverage over the copper-rich regions. Let's also talk about copper. So copper is known for its high conductivity, malleability, corrosion resistance, plays a crucial role in the modern industries. India, although not among the largest producers of copper, has a significant copper industry that contributes in various sectors. We have the properties, just go through that. Copper is 100% recyclable without any loss in its quality. What are the major reserves? In Rajasthan, we have K3 and Junjun belt, right? Junjunu belt. Then we have in Madhya Pradesh, we have the Malanjkhand mine, the largest open pit copper mine in India. In Jharkhand, we have the Singhbhum copper belt. We have the Hindustan Copper Limited, operates at key mines in these regions. Large exporter of copper in the world, we have Chile, the leading exporter accounting for 30% of the global production. Peru, known for its extensive copper mines. China, a significant exporter despite being a large consumer. United States, we have major copper reserves in the Arizona and Utah. Then we have Australia, a consistent exporter with large mining operations. Dependence on copper imports. India imports almost 30 to 40% of its refined copper, with Japanese suppliers accounting for almost 80% of imports. Good quality copper is being imported from Japan. In 23-24, India imported refined copper worth almost 16,500 crores, primarily for manufacture of electric wires and cables. That's all from my side. I hope you really enjoyed the discussion. All the very best. Thank you so much.